point out in some of your writings that in the South, where you have this historical context, no unions, right? Low wages.
Yes.
Latinos are coming en masse to the South. Talk about that. Why?
I think it was sort of touched on a little bit by the previous panel. Somebody sort of made the joke, everybody's realizing they don't want to live in Los Angeles. But as somebody myself, just migrated out of Los Angeles recently, and you've seen the saturation of local labor markets in places like Los Angeles, whereas if you come to the South, I mean, think about what's coming to my mind. Blink is sort of monitoring mushroom. I actually was at the University of Tennessee previously, and there's a mushroom plant in Lenore City, and a lot of people are coming there actually from Philadelphia. So it's interesting, you're getting these transnational communities that link from Guanajuato, Mexico, out to Pennsylvania, down to Lenore City. Why are they coming to Lenore City in the middle, close to Knoxville, but really in the middle of nowhere? Well, in Lenore City, they're making $11 an hour. They had actually 401k plans. They had health insurance. The conditions there were much better than they experienced in Pennsylvania. This was an opportunity not to be working as a farm laborer in the fields. It was essentially a new labor market. This was sort of, a place where they could really make a start of it and make more than they had in Los Angeles. The other thing is, you could probably relate to this a little bit here in New Orleans. You look at housing prices in Los Angeles. What is it? A one-bedroom apartment? I have some Angelinos in here. A one-bedroom apartment. What's it going for right now in Los Angeles? What's that? 200, you got it, exactly. I mean, and a lot of Latinos are working, minimum wage jobs. And if you're paying that kind of rent in Los Angeles, that doesn't give you a lot of money. However, when you go out to Tennessee, a one-bedroom apartment on average is going to run you, maybe $400 a month. That leaves an awful lot of money left over. So even if you look at sort of wage differentials, they're making slightly more in places like, in Lenore City, Tennessee, but that translates into an awful lot more disposable income because of cost of living. So definitely cost of living, opportunities, and also very important have been middlemen. And that was huge in bringing Latino labor to New Orleans after the storm, was the role that subcontractors are playing. But in Tennessee, you have firms like all the way across the street. All you need to do, if you're working at Tyson Chicken, you can call one of these companies up and say, hey, you know what, in a month, I need 200 workers, and they'll be there. So these middlemen have also provided opportunities for places in the middle of nowhere, Lenore City, Tennessee, to recruit Latino labor very, very quickly, and also transform local communities very, very quickly. That was something that came up earlier. What has been sort of different about immigration in this new era is the rapidity with which we've been seeing change happening. I mean, New Orleans, of course, is the sort of the obvious example, but you've had these kind of rapid community transformations all the way across the South.
So I want to expand on that in particular, and I'll throw this off to all the panelists. Clearly, population and their needs drive a lot of the social justice agenda in every city. In particular in the South, when you're talking about voting rights, you're talking about the labor movements, particularly during King's era, when you're talking about civil rights, right? These things sort of were driven around a black agenda, right? And these things were real, right? So when new folks come into town, how adaptable are those structures to those new folks? And you may want to just talk about if folks want to bring in new blood into their organizations. You can name the classic civil rights organizations, NAACP, Urban League, so on and so forth. But in the main, how is that infrastructure that's created by populations impacted when new populations come in? And anyone can grab a hold.
Well, I mean, this is the classic question facing immigrant rights or immigrant advocacy groups and civil rights organizations in the South of how much can this sort of the playbook of the civil rights movement be drawn on. And we see a lot of examples. In 2003, there was the Immigrant Workers Freedom Ride, where they literally mapped onto the geography of the original Freedom Ride. You see instances where we talked about this before we all came together of something like the legal definition of what minority means in different state contexts. And the way that state contracts have minority set-asides that come out of much, much political struggle from African-American communities and organizations in the South? What does it mean when Latino business owners in places like Memphis, I'm working on a project about this with a colleague, come in and want to redefine what it means to be a minority, to include the category Latino or Hispanic, or however you want to define that, as being defined as a minority in the state and therefore eligible for these set-asides that came out of this political struggle. And this really, I mean, this is the question of how much can we translate these things. Are the sites that were so symbolic to the civil rights movement, downtown spaces, spaces of consumption, where a lot of the political activism focused in the civil rights movement, do they carry the same symbolic currency for an immigrant rights movement, or is it different spaces? Because if you look at what sites are being contested over an immigrant presence, it is the workplace, but it's also things like your neighbor, it's the neighborhood, it's these very intimate spaces of social reproduction, and that is a different geography.